is the first in a series of talks on the Canterbury Cathedral Cloister, in which I hope to share some of the findings of my book, Great Cloister, A Lost Canterbury Tale. I am covering 11 of the 36 bays in one go because my primary focus is on the heraldry, and there are only 23 or perhaps 24 heraldic devices in the 11 bays here combined, whereas the other bays have between 31 and 39 shields each. All of the remaining bays will be considered on an individual basis. The reason for the relative absence of heraldry is that the South Walk was the first to be built, and it's possible to see how the concept of a fully heraldic cloister evolved while it was being constructed. Here is the South Walk running beside the cathedral nave. This part of the cloister was demolished in 1377, when the nave itself was demolished as part of a rebuilding programme. Archbishop Courtney, who died in 1396, anticipated the need to rebuild the South Walk of the cloister in a bequest which he made in his will. It has sometimes been wrongly inferred that work on it began soon after his death, but the nave was not completed until 1400, with work on the vaulting carrying on for several more years after that. After the work on the nave was completed, attention moved to building a new chapter house, completed in 1405. It made sense to finish the buildings around the cloister before rebuilding the cloister itself. There is every reason to suppose that the cloister was created in a single building programme. Each bay was the work of 2 months' labour, and thus to build all 36 bays would have taken 6 years. No documents recording the date of commencement of the cloister have survived, but the date of completion, that is June 1414, is quite well evidenced, on which basis work would have commenced in July 1408. With this background in mind, it's time to begin our walk of the first 11 bays, following the sequence in which I believe they were built. We must first orientate ourselves. In the traditional numbering scheme for the cloister bays, which was devised by Thomas Willimant in 1827, primacy was given to the bay immediately outside the door of the transept in which Thomas Becket was murdered. During the Catholic era, what we now call Bay 1 was a holy spot, where doubtless many would have knelt in prayer. Heading west, away from the martyrdom, we follow the South Walk with its 10 bays towards the medieval entrance of the Archbishop's Palace, which no longer exists. Today, this entry is the most direct way of approaching the cloister after entering the cathedral precincts through the Christchurch gate. We will pass for now through Bay 10, which was the first fully heraldic bay and is the subject of the second talk of this series, Bay 10 being completed later. Let us look upwards at the vault of the next most westerly bay of the South Walk, Bay 9. We see here what is conceptually the most simple of the 36 bays. Its bosses have simple but beautiful foliate designs, with only a small number of examples entirely lacking in symbolism. There are just a couple of carved heads, one of which we see here, and there are 2 coats of arms. On the all-important central boss are those of Archbishop Arundel, in whose primacy the cloister was built, charmingly supported by 3 angels. He was the first archbishop to impale his personal arms, those of Fitzalan, with the See of Canterbury from the outset of his primacy, because this form of impalement was a new idea for bishoprics. We also see the arms of the cathedral priory, which have been incorrectly repainted as those of St. George. Moving on to Bay 8, there is only a single coat of arms here, those of Archbishop Arundel again, but this time we have his family arms, differenced with a border engrailed, as the mark of a younger son of the Earl of Arundel. Here are a number of very interesting faces, with a very regal looking bearded figure with a Plantagenet face, top right, reminiscent of one of the 3 Edwards. A round-faced man with a doctor's cap, bottom left. Could this be the learned Prior Chillenden, rather cheekily included? There is a wonderful green man and a grapevine, an ancient Christian symbol, bottom centre, with a bird eating the grapes, the grape juice being emblematic of the blood of Christ. There are 2 additional allegorical bosses. On the left here, a Lamb of God, and on the right what I take to be a lion laying down with a lamb, the lion representing Christ resurrected and the lamb Christ crucified. Bay 7 is not dissimilar to Bay 8. The central boss honours Archbishop Courtenay. Courtenay's arms are impaled with those of his diocese, a practice which seemingly began during his primacy, perhaps in response to King Richard II's innovative impalement of his personal arms with those of Edward the Confessor. There are also arms which I have deduced to be for Courtenay's great-nephew, Edward, the eldest son and heir of the then Earl of Devon. His use of the crescent for difference, or in this case actually 3 crescents, was at that time a popular alternative to the label as the mark of an eldest son during his father's lifetime, and the Courtenay arms had long been differenced with a label to distinguish the English family from their French ancestors. We have once again numerous heads, and also in this bay is the first monster, a siren, taking the form of a double-tailed mermaid or Melusina. She carries a comb and a mirror, as in other medieval examples. A girl must always look her best. The restorers painted her comb as a set of pipes, which seems fitting for a siren, but is nonetheless probably incorrect. Here was a warning to the monks to avoid temptation. Bay 6 has 3 heraldic devices. Firstly, there is the badge of a crescent moon and star, a device which had long been used in the Eastern Roman Empire and was later to be adopted by the Turks. Crusaders also copied the idea, and we find these symbols on the first Great Seal of Richard the Lionheart. It is true that this was made before his departure for the East, but it might be taken as a visible expression of his intention to go there. Henry IV was himself a crusader, and it seems that he reintroduced the emblems as a royal livery. In the cloister, the moon and star are superimposed on a rose, presumably the red rose of Lancaster. Nearby are two rather extraordinary bosses, each comprising 3 conjoined heads, perhaps of demons, with their tongues protuberant and almost touching. These were perhaps intended as a warning against slander. The second heraldic presence in the bay is the 3 crowns of the arms of St. Edmund, one of the 2 traditional patron saints of England and of its royal house, the other being St. Edward the Confessor, whose arms are elsewhere in the cloister. The presence of these arms is perhaps a testament to the support of the crown for the Canterbury building works. The distinctive arms of the cinque ports of the 3 Lions of England demediating 3 ships most likely commemorates a donation made by the then Lord Warden of the ports, Sir Thomas Erpingham, whose personal arms were placed in the chapter house. The title of this military confederation is of considerable antiquity and refers to the original 5 Kent Sussex ports of Dover, Hastings, Hythe, Romney and Sandwich, to which Winchelsea and Rye were added in 1191, and subsequently many other ports were appended. The arms are datable to the reign of Edward I. The field was modified to include the colour azure after Edward III added the royal arms of France with their blue background to the royal arms in 1340. There is a multiplicity of human heads in Bay 6, but the decoration is otherwise floral. Bay 5 has no definite heraldry. Its central boss has a shepherd playing the pipes to his sheep, presumably an allegory of Christ as the Good Shepherd. Also in this bay we have Adam and Eve. The serpent on the tree of wisdom has been given a woman's head. We can see the apple high up in the tree waiting to be plucked. There is a boss which we see here bottom left of a dog with a single head and 2 bodies. There are more human faces and green men. One final boss of interest here might be either a religious symbol or an heraldic badge. Do we have here the Lamb of God, or is it a hart sitting beneath a tree and emparked, a badge of the Holland family, Earls of Kent, first used by Joan, Princess of Wales, the mother of King Richard II, of whom more will be said. Bay 4 is quite devoid of heraldry, the central boss being a pelican feeding its young. The pelican here, with its head missing, was believed to feed its nestlings with its own blood and is therefore another Christ allegory. There are a great variety of heads carved as bosses in this bay, including demons and snake-like creatures, one of which we see here on the left, emblematic of evil. Bay 3 sees a return to heraldry with another repeat of the arms of Archbishop Courtney, impaling the diocese, borne by a human figure with its head missing. We have the Elephant and Castle badge of Beaumont, the cousins of Archbishop Arundel, the Beaumont family having been brought to England by Eleanor of Castile. The cloister is the earliest definite usage of this distinctive badge in England, but the device had a long prior history of usage on the Iberian Peninsula, and Eleanor perhaps brought it with her. The silver cross on a black background, which we see here on the right, also carried by a human figure, is the arms of the original sister abbey of Christ Church in Canterbury, St Augustine's, both monasteries having been founded by the apostle to the English in the 6th century. Archbishop Arundel was, unusually for an Archbishop of Canterbury, on very good personal terms with the abbot of St Augustine's, who can be assumed to have made a donation to the building works. There are several more green men, a lion attacking a serpent, which we see here top centre, representing Christ combating the devil, 2 wild men, bottom centre, there being many more in the next bay, and here on the left a Lamb of God holding a cross and enveloped in a grapevine, and on the right a regal looking princess with a headband superimposed on a large rose. This might be the Princess Philippa, the king's youngest child, whose mother died giving birth to her in 1394. She is known to have visited the cathedral with her stepmother Queen Joan in 1403, and likely visited again in 1406, prior to her departure to become Queen of Denmark. Bay 2 has a bit of a wild man theme. The central boss has a group of such wild men of the woods known as woodwassers. One of them, we can see, rides a horse and spears a boar. Another boss has a wild man overcoming a bull, while the arms of Archbishop Courtney are supported here by 2 wild men. They are essentially medieval satyrs. It was not uncommon for entertainers to dress up in this guise, and the wild men receive a mention in the Arthurian tale Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which was written down not too many years before this boss was carved. Perhaps we might infer that this was an affectionate tribute to Archbishop Courtney, who perhaps enjoyed such diversions. 3 other bosses represent a different morality tale, that of Reynard the Fox. We see here on the left the fox posing as an abbot with an abbot's crozier and preaching to the geese. He is thinking of his supper and not of religion. Another depicts the fox taking one of the geese, and we have on the right the fox being hung on a gibbet by the vengeful geese. Here are the Courtney arms supported by wild men, and also an estoil superimposed on a rose, probably another royal badge. The royal helm and crest surrounded by greenery. There are 5 green men and a variety of human faces. One of the green men is seen here on the left. while on the right is a winged heart, emblematic of the Annunciation to the Blessed Virgin. In Bay 1 there are no heads of any sort, either human or demon, and it's tempting to suggest that this is out of respect for the sanctity of this special bay. Like Bay 9, the bay is quite plain, with only floral bosses. The one thing that stands out magnificently here, in the centre, is the arms of the Archbishop's sister, Juliana de Boon, Dowager Countess of Northampton, Hereford and Essex, these being the arms of Boon or Bohun impaling FitzAlan. They were carved strikingly large compared to the arms which had been carved previously for the South Walk, but with the lions in matching style to those in bays 6, 8 and 9. It is my belief and contention that the special treatment given to these arms, in order to honour the Countess, is quite pivotal to understanding the decision to create a fully heraldic cloister. By my estimation, they were put in place here in December 1409 in response to an event which took place at the cathedral on the 6th of April 1405, when the Countess was received into the cathedral confraternity and doubtless made a generous donation. In support of this contention is the fact that a shield now blank at the junction between bays 1 and 36 once carried the royal arms of Portugal. The likely sponsor of the arms was Beatrice, the daughter of João, King of Portugal, and she visited Canterbury in November 1405 on her way to being married by the Archbishop to his nephew, the Earl of Arundel. It was in the same pivotal month in 1409, on the 21st of December, that Archbishop Arundel resigned as Chancellor of England, having been running the royal administration for the previous 3 years. He was then able to devote all his energies to his diocese, to his cathedral, and to his personal interest in heraldry. Prior Chillenden needed more money for construction work. The Archbishop stood beneath the martyrdom bay, looked up, and saw how he was going to raise that money. He immediately began to solicit money from those with whom he came into contact, be that in his own halls or elsewhere, on the promise that the arms would be placed in the cloister. Meanwhile, he directed that 2 more of the new-style large heraldic bosses be placed in the next bay to be constructed, now rounding the corner to rebuild the East Walk. The first of these bays, Bay 36, sees the return of human faces, and there are 11 in the bay, plus a rather soft-looking lion's face. In the centre are the royal arms, apparently carved by a new heraldic specialist, and those of Fogg which we see here on the right. The recently deceased Sir Thomas Fogg, who died in 1407, and his wife Joan de Valoins were great benefactors of the cathedral, and were together admitted to the confraternity in 1404, when they made a donation towards the building of the chapter house. Bay 35 has the largest number of arms of any bay constructed up to that point, there being 5 in total. And in the centre, replacing a lost boss not thought to be heraldic, are the modern arms of Margaret Babington, who for many years ran the Cathedral Friends, and during whose watch the cloister was repainted. It again has some very striking human faces, including one which, on two bosses in this bay, looks like a female version of King Richard II. And it is to be wondered whether she might be his mother, Joan, Princess of Wales, the so-called Fair Maid of Kent. She was called thus as the daughter and heiress of Edmund Plantagenet, Earl of Kent. The arms of the cathedral priory occur in two different versions. One is small and carried by an angel. It is in the style of the heraldic bosses from the South Walk, and I speculate that this is the last bay with which the principal mason responsible for that walk was involved. His particular speciality of human faces, demons, green men and allegorical scenes was no longer going to be needed. The second priory shield and the three remaining shields are all in the new large style. The shield seen on the left is at the junction between bays 35 and 36. The lion is that already mentioned in the preceding bay. And here we have the three other shields. That on the left, or across engrailed sable, was for Joan Lady Mohun, or Moon, who, dying in 1404, had made a very large bequest to the cathedral. In the centre was originally argent across sable, since wrongly repainted, but originally standing for Norwich Cathedral Priory. Quite possibly the Archbishop met the abbot of that monastery in the company of the known cathedral benefactor Sir Thomas Erpingham, a Norwich man who became a considerable benefactor of Norwich Cathedral. The arms of Battisford of Sussex to the right also occur in the next bay to be constructed, right at the other end of the South Walk at Bay 10, and represent a benefaction by the daughters of Margaret Battisford, who died in 1406. To complete the survey of the South Walk, I'm going to walk you down it once again to show how the heraldic artistry evolved in the process of construction.
So we're beginning our walk up the South Walk of the cloister in Bay 9 with its two heraldic shields, both relatively modest in size, one supported by angels and the other on a rosette of leaves. Moving on to Bay 8 with its one central shield, again on a rosette of leaves. Note that it doesn't reach beyond the intersection of the ribbing. Bay 7 has two centrally positioned shields, once again relatively modest in size. Bay 6 has 3 centrally placed shields, again relatively modest in size. Bay 5 has just one small boss, which is potentially an heraldic badge, although that's not certain, and it's also small in size. We move on to Bay 4, which has no heraldry at all. Bay 3 has 3 small heraldic devices, including 2 very small shields, which are difficult to spot unless you actually know they're there, and there's also the small badge of the Beaumont family. Bay 2 has a very small shield of Courtenay at number 29, the royal crest at number 5, and close to that a possible royal badge. And now we reach Bay number 1, where for the first time we have a really substantially sized shield in the centre, whether the shield at number 5 was originally large because the current shield of Bargrave is a replacement. And now we seem to turn to the right, but in fact we're turning to the left because we're looking up, and so everything is seen in reverse. And now for the first time in Bay 36 we're seeing large shields which are not centrally located, so this is an innovation, and this continues in the next bay, in Bay 35, where we have one final very small shield of the Abbey at number 33, but all the other peripheral shields are very large in size, so this is the final turning point.
After which all the bays became fully heraldic. And to conclude, I show you this slide which compares the style of carving lions in the South Walk on the top row with those in the rest of the cloister. Note the distinct difference. You will find a great deal more information in the pages of my book, Great Cloister, A Lost Canterbury Tale, published by Archaeopress in 2020. It's more than just a book about the cloister, as it goes into considerable detail about each unique shield, tracing its origins. You will find here many of the great families of England up to the reign of Henry IV, and also the European kingdoms. It comprises over 700 pages, including 771 illustrations, 37 pedigrees and a detailed index. You are seeing here just a small selection of the pages. Shortly you will see on the screen details of how to find it. If you would like me to undertake research on your own family, I can be contacted via my personal website, drpaulfoxfsa.com. And finally, do please subscribe to my History and Heraldry channel on YouTube, which of course costs you nothing, so that you can follow additions to my list of talks.